Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Baker Institute. I'm Ed Jeredjian, the director of the Baker Institute. When I joined as founding director in 1994, obviously knew that energy issues would be an important part of our institute's work. We were located here in Houston, the energy capital of the world. Secretary Baker and I, with our long experience in the Middle East, understood firsthand the importance of the vital links in energy market supply chain. And like many of us who were in public service in the 1970s, we understood the direct impact secure energy supplies have on daily life and prosperity in America and abroad. Energy and climate loom large among the major challenges of the 21st century. Natural gas will play a key role, in part because it is an environmentally cleaner fuel than coal and oil, and it has been competitively priced. In the United States, natural gas currently represents 22% of total primary energy use. It is the fastest growing fuel for electricity generation and is now the second largest source of electricity generation after coal. Approximately 19% of all electricity generated in our country derives from burning natural gas, up from only about 10% in 1986, when wellhead natural gas prices were fully decontrolled. The trend has accelerated in recent years, as natural gas represents about 90% of all new megawatts of capacity installed in the United States in the last decade. So natural gas is also an important fuel among residential and commercial users for space heating and cooking. More than 50% of Americans heat their homes with natural gas, compared to 40% who use heating oil or electricity. In recent years, as U.S. natural gas use has climbed, we have seen an acceleration in the depletion of our conventional cheap resources. Now we find ourselves tapping more expensive deep water and unconventional resources, such as coal bed methane and shale gas. We have also moved away from self-sufficiency in natural gas and are increasingly relying on imports, other than the important and secure supplies of Canada. Already, LNG imports have risen from virtually zero in 1986 to just in excess of 0.5 trillion cubic feet, or 2.9% of total U.S. natural gas consumption in 2006. The United States imports LNG from a variety of countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, Egypt, Nigeria, and Algeria. The presidents of Egypt, Nigeria, Algeria have all visited the Baker Institute Energy Forum to talk about the expanding importance of natural gas to the United States and beyond. We have also hosted visits by leaders from future suppliers such as Qatar and Russia. Those of you will remember when President Putin came here several years ago, he made the bold statement that we should be relying on Russia more than a less reliable OPEC. It was a big sales pitch. But I was bolstered by that because I saw that really communism was defeated, and this man was really promoting private capital markets. Anyway, all have addressed the question of energy security and the environmental advantages of natural gas. As natural gas's importance as a world fuel rises, the geopolitical importance of natural gas has also expanded, and the countries like the United States have begun worrying about their increased reliance on foreign sources of natural gas. Russian gas monopoly Gazprom's sudden short cutoff of the Ukraine in January 2006 highlighted the dangers of relying too heavily on a single large supplier. The Baker Institute began a major research focus on natural gas in 2003. In 2005, we published a major study on the geopolitics of natural gas. Today, we are releasing a new study, completed under the direction of our fellow Kenneth Medlock. This study focuses specifically on North America. According to this new study, by 2030, U.S. consumers could be relying on LNG imports for as much as 30% of total supply. This has strong implications for security of natural gas supply, as the United States becomes more reliant on LNG from the Middle East and from Africa. This growing dependence on foreign sources has prompted some to question current U.S. policy toward the development of our own natural gas resources. The United States has a premier energy resource base, but it is a mature province, as you all well know, that has reached peak production in many traditional producing regions. In recent years, environmental and land use considerations have prompted the United States to remove from energy development significant acreage that was once available for exploration. 20 years ago, nearly 75% of federal lands were available for private lease to oil and gas exploration companies. Since then, the share has fallen down to 17%. There are significant natural gas resources unexploited off the U.S. Atlantic and Pacific coast and the eastern Gulf of Mexico, in Alaska, and in many areas of the Rocky Mountains. These areas collectively are estimated to contain more than 130 trillion cubic feet of natural gas resources. We will be presenting results today of our study of what an easing of exploration restrictions would mean for the United States. No discussion of the U.S. natural gas market is complete without including our neighbors to the north and south. Both Canada and Mexico play a vital role in the future of natural gas in North America. Canada has been an important supplier to the United States, and we will hear today about the Canadian National Energy Board's outlook for future Canadian exports. Resources in Mexico remain largely untapped, despite the fact that Mexican demand is expected to increase substantially in the coming years. This will leave Mexico itself increasingly dependent on foreign imports unless it can reform its energy sector. In fact, Mexico is a net importer of natural gas from the United States and has recently begun to import LNG from abroad, with plans to open more regasification facilities. We will hear about Mexico's plans today from our honored guest from Mexico's Energy Regulatory Commission, Francisco Salazar. Mr. Salazar gave an excellent speech at the Baker Institute about Mexico's energy industry in 2005, and we're looking forward to hearing his latest insights today. Today's Natural Gas in North America Markets and Security Conference gives us a great opportunity to discuss in depth the outlook for North American natural gas. The conference has been organized by the Baker Institute and UT's Center for Energy Economics, and we have brought together leaders and scholars to discuss their perspectives from the political, commercial, and academic realms to address the issues I've just outlined. We are pleased to have representatives from the United States Department of Energy, U.S. Geological Survey, and the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, as well as representatives, as I said, from Canada and Mexico. I really want to commend our Baker Institute Energy team, Amy Jaffe, who heads our Energy Forum, Ken Medlock, who is really the key author of this study, Peter Hartley from our Economics Department, Jennifer Rostow, Lawrence Smolker, and Matthew Chen for their efforts on this new study and their really hard work to organize this timely conference. And we're especially thankful to the Independent Petroleum Association of America, the IPAA, McKinsey & Company, and our Energy Forum members for their generous support of our program and for this specific study. In particular, I would like to commend IPAA and McKinsey & Company for their generous support for scholarships for Rice undergraduate and graduate student researchers to have the opportunity to work at the Baker Institute Energy Forum and participate in studies such as this one we'll be presenting today. So I would now like to introduce John Walker, former president of IPAA. John is president and CEO of Envervest and EV Partners LP. John has played an instrumental role in the United States energy business, raising hundreds of millions of dollars for investment to keep our domestic industry strong. He has also provided valuable insights on our energy industry and was selected 6 years in a row as a top analyst by Institutional Investor. John is obviously a major investor. I'm thinking of having him look over my investment portfolio after today's session, but I don't think he can deal with the lack of zeros in my portfolio. John has been a great friend of the Baker Institute Energy Forum, and we are pleased to have him here at the conference to make introductory remarks. John.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's nice to be here on well, this is a typical Houston day. 40 at night, 70 in the day. This is sort of a year-round type of situation. I'm sort of the token independent oil man here. I started my company 15 years ago, and we're now producing about 260 million cubic feet a day, so gas is important to us. We operate over 11,000 wells, but I take great pride in that they're some of the crummiest wells in the United States. But they will be around another 40 to 70 years probably, so that makes it a lot of fun. IPAA is the U.S. oil and gas industry's largest upstream educational and lobbying organization. There's 5,000 member entities and over 50,000 grassroots members that we, on important regulations or legislation, we call together via email and other ways to try to create a little more potent lobbying organization. Our members drill over 90% of the wells in the U.S., and if you look at the resource plays, if you will, in the U.S., independents dominate those unconventional plays. IPAA's Energy Foundation makes a $100,000 grant each year to further U.S. energy education, understanding, and policy. 2 years ago, the recipient was this institute, the James Baker Institute, to study natural gas. That excellent study is being introduced today, and I would say that also it's probably already gotten more publicity based upon the Houston Chronicle article today than the two previous gas studies by the MPC. So it's one thing to study. It's another thing to market the ideas and try to get them enacted. We ask that high school, as well as undergraduate and graduate RISE students, get the opportunity to assist in the study. And the Institute enthusiastically met that request. It's very important to our industry, which is suffering from a lack of people. In fact, the critical path to growth in the oil and gas industry really is a lack of engineers, geologists, and landmen. And so it's very important to have students involved in this kind of study. While the National Petroleum Council has spent millions of dollars in excellent study on U.S. natural gas and the recent study on facing hard truths, those studies have not been embraced by policymakers. And in fact, in a recent study, very few people have this, very few of the congressmen even have a copy of the hard truths study, or at least they didn't acknowledge that they had a study that came out of the MPC after so much work. It's my hope that the Institute's work will be more widely read and its recommendations studied and utilized by legislators. I could spend hours discussing my frustration of dealing with lawmakers and regulators in Washington, D.C., particularly when I was chairman of the IPAA. And I don't think that we have time for that. But our energy regulators and laws hamper U.S. natural gas production and cost consumers hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm hopeful that the Institute's highly regarded reputation and excellent study will cause thoughtful legislators and regulators to reevaluate access issues, which is highlighted in the study, burdensome regulations, and inordinate red tape, and delays in supplying this country with its own indigenous natural gas. I take great pride in directing the IPAA grant to the Institute and look forward to a fruitful day of discussing these complex issues. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Amy Jaffe from the Baker Institute Energy Forum. It's really a pleasure to have you all here. John, thank you for your remarks. We like to think our studies are read very widely at the highest circles in government and industry and academia, and We really proud of the work we've done on natural gas. We're very proud of the interns that have worked on the study. And we did indeed, we have a special program now at the Institute where we bring in young people from the local area high schools, from the public schools, Lamar High School and Bel Air High School and Austin High School to work with us in the summer. We've been doing it for a few years. IPAA made it a little easier for us to expand the program, and I will tell you, the ambassador and I are going to get together a list for you all so you can see how many of the young people who are Rice undergraduates and even these high school students wind up actually studying the energy industry after they have this intern experience. And they all have the same experience I had. So I'll tell a quick personal story, 2 seconds. I was offered a job years and years ago, and I won't tell you how many years ago, at Dow Jones, and the job they had for me was writing about oil. I had a very close friend at the time who was at the New York Times, and I'd been writing about the Middle East, business, oil, banking, so many different interesting things, and I called her up and I said, they've offered me this job, but as part of this job, I have to collect the prices for oil for the Wall Street Journal. That sounds so tedious. Do you think I should take the job? And she said, no, just take the job because you want to be Dow Jones, Wall Street Journal, you'll have articles, and then after 6 months, when you show them what a good reporter you are, you can ask to be switched to another subject. Right? Well, I move into the job, spend 2 weeks doing it. It was the most fascinating topic I'd ever looked at. Really, it's everything. It's geopolitics, it's economics, it's local politics. And, well, the rest is history because I'm here talking to all of you from Rice University. But the bottom line is this is a subject that's so important that when people just actually finally get connected to the subject, they become very engaged. And so we have a lot of students at Rice that come here to go to law school or medical school. And some of them accidentally fall through our doors. And they're going to wind up in your industry. And they're some of the best and brightest people we have here in this country. So we really thank the IPAA and McKinsey for making it possible for us to do this. And we thank all of you, too, for your support for our work over the years. So without further ado, it's really an honor here to have this great opening lineup for you from our 3 big North American gas producers, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And we're going to start out today's program with Karen Ann Fredrickson, Texas born and bred. She's an Aggie, so those of you from UT, hold it down. She currently serves as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Office of Policy and International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy. Probably a lot of you know her from her days as the principal and founder of Capital Plus Consulting. And she's a person who knows her way around the regulations and regulatory issues on the Hill. So anyway, at the coffee break, if anybody's wanting to talk about that, she knows more about that than probably most people in this country. So Kathy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy, and it's good to be back at the Baker Center. I had the pleasure and the honor of being here a few months ago to hear Dr. Medlock actually give a presentation on geopolitics of oil. And certainly, growing up in Texas as the #1 energy producing state in the United States, we thought everything was about Texas and energy. But that is certainly no longer the case, as we have a truly look at energy in a global setting. It's also my honor to substitute here today for a Rice graduate who could not be here, Karen Harbert, because she is traveling with the Secretary of Energy and is currently in Turkey because energy issues are so very key, and Turkey is quite a nexus for the globe. Let's see here. I've got. Okay, I will try to be coordinated and do this, so y'all bear with me. Truly, energy security is inextricably linked and intertwined with our national economic well-being. I think as we look to China and India's growing economies and developing economies, they're criticized resoundingly for environmental concerns, and yet they're going through a rapid economic development that is fundamentally fueled by energy, and it can't be broken apart. So you have to find the clear path forward for them that's energy secure as well as environmentally protective. In the United States, it's still a concern for us as well to expand and diversify our energy supply and our energy suppliers, to increase our efficiency and be better consumers of energy. Certainly, Japan leads the world in its energy efficiency, and we look to model and to aspire to be as good and efficient as Japan is. We need to modernize and expand our infrastructure. Certainly, the United States is looked to as leaders in producers of energy, and yet we have an aging infrastructure, such as our electric grid, transmission grid, that needs significant upgrading. And we can do a better job of improving our environmental stewardship, and some of those improvements may have implications for natural gas, and we'll talk about that today. In 2001, President Bush came into office in 2001, instituted a national energy policy undertaking that resulted in over 101 recommendations. And I am actually proud to say that I personally had to go through all of that and see where we were in stock taking, and we've actually moved forward on 100 out of 101, or we've been stymied by Congress for their inaction on some of those. So the only one we haven't done is leasing from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 was a long time in making, and I still bear some scars from that and hope to not have to go through it again, although one is pending before our Congress right now. But it really formed the backbone of and upgraded our new look at the law, and formed some basis that resulted in incentives and new programs at all agencies, but especially at the Department of Energy, because we bore the brunt of that, to move forward on a new energy plan. To complement that, the President announced his Advanced Energy Initiative, and we've continued to build on that, which is fundamentally driven by we need to change the way we power our homes, our businesses, and our vehicles. Just a little bit of a progress update. I won't go through too many statistics, but you can see up there that we have made significant progress since the energy bill was passed in 2005. And we've got increasing demand for ethanol, for blending, for fuel under the requirements of the EPACT. We will actually surpass the 2012 goal this year to blend because the demand has been there. And we are advancing cellulosic ethanol, or second generation ethanol, at the United States Department of Energy. Electricity generation, I think, as the ambassador mentioned earlier, is certainly the fastest growing source of power, and new power plants are coming online and trending to be natural gas fired. They're increasing by about 1.8% per year. Nuclear has been expanding, and we are quite pleased with the fact that we are seeing a nuclear renaissance in the United States as well as the globe, and certainly some programs that we've put together and some partnerships are aimed at expanding that. But we still have a ways to go to meet our demands for our energy, for our continued strength in our economy. Our dependence on imported energy is only going to continue to grow, and that brings energy security concerns for us, as well as supply questions and making sure we are getting them from reliable suppliers. Thank goodness our number one and number two suppliers are Canada and Mexico, because we are blessed with having friendly neighbors. Some countries in the world aren't so blessed. And Canada also is our number two supplier of natural gas, and so that's a very healthy relationship that we have. Our gas imports are expected to grow. Our coal imports will also grow, unfortunately, because even though we have 250 years of coal reserves in this country, they're still continuing to come into the United States because of the need for certain qualities or aspects of coal. I won't go into too many details because my colleague from EIA is here and he'll get a lot more specific, but I just want to tee up a few of those. Here's our import projections for LNG. It's not your eyes that are fuzzy, it's actually the graph, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to go to the eye doctor afterwards. As you can see, the LNG projections are quite steep for the United States. Ambassador also alluded to that earlier. And that's corresponding to increasing Henry Hub spot prices. About 3 years ago, I remember Commissioner Brownell from the FERC made a comment that we needed to all get a grip. We weren't going back to $3 a million BTU gas. And I think she's been proved right so far. With gas prices being high, we still see gas consumption growing, although it grows a little slower, except in the power generation sector. We have had some mild weather, and we've had significant increased storage levels over the past year. And so we've had a little bit of a softening in the market, although that may look to change a little as we enter into the winter time. We're still seeing production declines in the Gulf. That's concerning. So what's taking its place or filling the void, obviously, is LNG. We are expected to surpass our LNG imports from last year by about 40%. And projected prices will continue to rise and average out at about $8.65 an MCF. So next year, we're looking at discontinued increases. Regasification facilities are coming online, especially in the Gulf Coast region, Louisiana and Texas. And so we'll have continued increases in LNG imports. Where our sources are primarily Trinidad and Tobago, although Nigeria is coming on as the next largest supplier for us. And being Nigeria, that of course brings certain concerns from an energy security standpoint there. Natural gas consumption for our first quarter was actually 10% higher than 2006, and that was with above average temperatures. So it's definitely hitting a nexus or a crisis that we actually need to be cognizant of, and I have read the new studies that have been released, and I think I look forward to the presentations of those later today. Here's where our LNG facilities are coming on, are online or coming online. We are still having great conflicts or controversy with getting them into the eastern seaboard and the western seaboard where they're needed, but thank goodness we actually like energy in the Texas Gulf Coast region, so we don't actually mind having them built. Production numbers are going to continue to rise. I think this is illustrative of how much, despite demand rising and despite prices rising, nothing seems to be slowing. But it's concerning because it actually results in increased electricity prices. The industrial sector is already paying about 5% more, and we're going to start seeing the residential sector start to pay more, about 2.4% more than they have last year. It's only going to continue to rise. Electricity's demand is about 1.8% per year on an increase, and although the prices are rising faster than the demand. And here's why there's the problem on the environmental side. About 80% of the current anthropogenic GHG emissions are energy related. And it's not unimaginable to think that the world will see a tripling of energy demand. The International Energy Agency just released its World Energy Outlook. They're actually at DOE today giving a presentation on the WEO. And while coal is expected to fill this void, CO2 emissions are going to continue to increase, especially in China and especially in India. So what we've taken on as our energy strategy and what we actually work with other countries around the globe to do, especially those that are dependent on unreliable large sources of single source suppliers, is to diversify not only your suppliers but also your types of energy. Certainly the one mantra we always preach is the best source of energy is the one we waste, so we need to increase our energy efficiency, and certainly DOE has established programs and incentives to do just that. We're working on our efficiency of our vehicles. This December, the Environmental Protection Agency will put out a new greenhouse gas emissions rule. for vehicles that will drive increased efficiency standards as well. It'll have a coupled with a CAFE standard increase, and that's the result of a decision at the Supreme Court in the Massachusetts versus EPA carbon dioxide case. Nuclear energy is one of the most emission-free, the dependable baseload power generation we could have, although we haven't built a nuclear reactor in 30 years. You think it's bad finding engineers. It's really hard to find a nuclear engineer that's younger than 55 years old. So that's a concern for us in this country. We were very pleased that the Tennessee Valley Authority reactivated one of its reactors just about a month and a half ago. We've got 2 nuclear licenses before our Nuclear Regulatory Commission for new plants that are pending. There's approximately 32 planned nuclear reactors to come online over the coming years. One of the programs we have instituted to see nuclear power come back online in a safe manner is nuclear risk insurance. We issued standby risk insurance for the first 6 nuclear power plants that will be that have filed applications. Basically, the regulatory risk is higher than any other risk getting a new nuclear power plant brought online. And so this basically provides the risk insurance for investors to say, if the regulatory system, be it federal or state, delays the permitting and you can't get your plant online, we'll actually guarantee that and back it up with money. We also established the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership. I was pleased to be present with the Secretary in Vienna in September of this year, where we brought on 16 new partners, and the Secretary signed Italy as the 17th new partner in the GNEP. A Global Nuclear Energy Partnership is designed to, it's built around the fundamental that if you want to have safe nuclear proliferation-resistant power, you need to provide fuel leasing centers that would actually lease fuel and take back spent fuel. And so that embodies the concept of GNEP, and that's coupled with advanced reactor technology development, which is also a part of our Generation 4 initiative. We are also looking at advancing our clean coal power options. The EPACT had incentives for clean coal power, and our budget for this year that we just concluded had $281 million in funding for research. It almost completed the President's $2 billion 10-year commitment to this about 4 years early. We've got FutureGen, where there's should be a site selection chosen in December. Well, there's 2 sites in Texas under consideration. It will be the first near-zero emission coal-fired power plant using integrated gasification combined cycle technology with carbon sequestration. That is actually a global effort. I lead the negotiations on that, and we are very close to signing on five new partners internationally, which would include China, Korea, Japan, India, and Australia. Our research in carbon capture and sequestration embodies 7 regional partnerships, and we're about to launch the first large-scale CO2 sequestration of over 1 million tons of carbon dioxide in 3 of those 7 partnerships. But what's disturbing is, despite the President's commitment and our programs and incentives that have been applied to build advanced clean coal power as alternatives to natural gas-fired power plants, state regulatory agencies have decided to back away. We have seen 3 states, Kansas, Minnesota, and recently Florida, make decisions that have hampered the investments in IGCC, and that's very disturbing for us, and it will only continue to push power plant development, for easy power plant development into natural gas. I talked a little bit about energy efficiency earlier. These are just a few of our programs that we have for providing incentives for not only consumers but industries to be more efficient with their energy consumption. The President actually issued an executive order this year, this fall, and said the federal government should lead by example. We should actually put up or shut up. And he required us to actually reduce our energy consumption by 20%. So painful as it is, DOE has started because we are the most energy inefficient agency in the District of Columbia. And so we have started that process at all 17 of our national labs and our headquarters building. We're undergoing, we've hired ESCOs, energy saving companies, to come in and do audits. And we're launching, the audits are underway, and we're going to make those upgrades, and it's in our budget for next year to actually go forward and make those improvements. And so then we get to start on transportation and EPA. So our environmental stewardship approach, the President this year in May announced that he would really, he would like to convene a major economies meeting, and we held that in September, and includes 16 nations that are the major economies that are developers and emitters, developing and developed, that are major emitters of CO2. This was quite significant for the rest of the world, although we didn't think so here in the U.S., because we have recognized that greenhouse gas emissions and climate change are a problem. We've endorsed the UNFCCC's and the IPCC's findings that anthropogenic emissions are causing increases in rising in climate change, and we need to do something about that. And so the President has asked that not only the U.S., but the other 15 economies get serious, roll up our sleeves, and actually find solutions. He'll have a presidential summit next summer. We have a lot to do in a very short period of time. There's two requirements under that. One is to set a long-term goal and actually a target and be held accountable for it, that all the countries will actually commit to that. And then there's a midterm component of that, and each country is asked to provide its own goals and its own national plans on achieving those goals, and so we hope to announce that by the first part of the summer next year. The United States spends the most of any country in the world on climate science and climate technology, or technologies to reduce climate change. We've spent since 2001 $36 billion. It averages around $6 billion a year, approximately $2 billion for climate science and $4 billion for technology. The Department of Energy coordinates the technology research and development for all the federal agencies. And so we have a very large commitment, and one that we would hold up to anyone. I just want to announce that we are actually on track to meet our greenhouse gas emission reductions. We have, the President set a goal of 18% by 2012 to reduce our greenhouse gas intensity, which is defined over GDP. We've actually reduced that by 1.3% last year, while our economy actually grew almost 3%. This is the magnitude of what it's going to take to actually reduce 1 gigaton of carbon dioxide. When folks start to say we've got to reduce, the sky is falling, we've got to do something, that's what we'd have to do. That's pretty auspicious. And we don't want to be deterred because that's scary. We want to actually do something about it, and do it in a measured way that still protects our economy and yet actually gets reductions. So finally, I'll just briefly sum up with here are our national gas goals. With our cooperation internationally, and especially with our partners to the north and the south of us, we can make natural gas production and trade more relevant. We can actually have better understanding of energy policies that work, and move into market approaches that actually will bring the results we need. We need to remove the regulatory uncertainties and make sure that we are making an attractive investment climate, so that we will continue to have investment in our three countries as well as the rest of the world. And LNG facilities, just finally, are a very key factor in our LNG, in our gas security for the United States, and it will have to have those to be competitive. And so we will continue to move on with our, we've got currently 7 LNG facilities permitted, and another I think 5 that are under consideration. So with that, I will close, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have as well. Or we can, I don't know how you want to do that, Amy.
Yeah, so here we have a question already.
Gigamaggie, by the way.
Hey, all right.
Nuclear is going to be an important part of the future economy. In Florida specifically, has got 2 reactors proposed. Do you have an idea? I'm sorry.
was talking about nuclear and the future in the U.S. economy. Do you have an estimate of what you think the installed cost for a new nuke is going to be, considering we haven't done one in quite a while, and we've seen the cost of all infrastructure go up so dramatically?
Yes, in fact, we had to assess that when we looked at our budget for our new loan guarantee program, our federal loan guarantee program. It's the first one of its kind for the department to have undertaken, and it actually federally backs advanced technologies that reduce climate change emissions, and so nuclear is a part of that. And those estimates are somewhere between $2 to $4 billion for a nuclear plant. And if you want to contrast that, a coal to liquids plant without carbon capture and sequestration of any type of large-scale coal to liquids plant is of the same magnitude. So you are talking a hefty investment, but somewhere around $3 billion.
For how many megawatts?
For 1,000 megawatt.
Other questions?
A 600, I'm sorry. We based it on a 600, but usually they're around 1,000 when they get installed.
In the reduction of greenhouse gases, when you talk about solar and wind, for instance, have you included provisions for the backup power that is necessary when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? Because in my mind, you're doubling your capital cost. Whenever you install a renewable, your capital cost essentially is double because you have to have backup somewhere.
No, that's exactly right. We are actually working on battery research for battery backup for storage because our grid system, as you know, isn't prepared to handle intermittent power generation. With it being an AC, with an alternating current, it doesn't work so well. So we can't rip down all the transmission lines and build DC power lines, and so we're trying to work on intermittent storage with battery backup so that to actually move forward on having renewables be a viable part of transmission, getting renewables that are generated in desert Southwest to load centers in Chicago is a challenge for us, and that's hopefully the one way we'll do that with the solution.
What about increasing access in the United States to natural gas that's off limits right now? What's the position on that?
Well, we continually call for opening. We aren't going to, we will respect the moratoria that are there, but certainly we have continued to have a policy at the administration to open those reserves that are not, I'm not doing that. This is to open that. It's certainly a contentious question, one that I don't have a good answer for you for, and I'm sorry about that. But it's complicated, as you know. Folks, we faced this when we looked at our ethanol projections, for example. We did a 30 by 30 examination of what it would take to get ethanol. And so being laboratory folks, they said, oh, we can use all this conservation resource protected land. That'll be great. And the duck hunters went, no, it would not. And so that's just an example of the conflicts we have. And so we know that there's gas that's shut in that we could get to. And we will continue to try to work with Congress to get those, to get access to those lands.
What is the DOE's position with regard to taxation at the pump?
For
gasoline?
Gasoline?
Yeah, with the inelasticity of gasoline and the issues that surround it around supply and demand and greenhouse gas emissions, it seems that would be an effective way to curb demand.
Unfortunately, we don't get to set the tax rates. The Congress does that, and those monies are marked for programs such as highways, etc. I think one of the components that gets left out in the consideration is how much is at a state level that's of control, even at a local level that's of control. I think the federal tax rate's around 18 cents, and so it's the rest of that actually has. It's always hard when you have a funding stream, a revenue stream to fund things, to actually take that away and find replacements for what the money goes for. And that's a delicate balance that Congress has to make. And so certainly even state application of increased taxes and local application it's the same kind of a challenge. So I think we've looked at the demand response to rising prices. I think one of the downsides of making efficient vehicles is people travel more. We've seen more vehicle miles traveled this year than we have ever seen in history, and yet we have had the highest gasoline prices ever. So as long as our economy is robust and folks can take a dollar out of their pocket and buy it, they're going to. I think London and Glenn might be able to give you a little bit better insight on this. We looked at the experiences in England, and when gasoline was about $8 a gallon equivalent is when they started to see consumer behavior change. We got a long way to go.
Thank Kathy for her presentation. That's a little discouraging. Okay, moving right along. We are pleased to have Roland George to come and present the National Energy Board's latest outlook. We all look forward to National Energy Board outlooks because they're always very interesting. Roland is chair of the NEB Regulatory Policy Committee and a member of the Regulatory Affairs Committee of the Canadian Association of Members of Public Utility Tribunals. He is also chair of the Caput 2008 Conference Program Committee and a member of the International Association of Energy Economics. Roland, thank you very much.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the organizers to inviting me here at the Baker Institute in Houston. In the previous life, I used to work as the North American natural gas practice lead for a Houston-based international energy consulting firm. And in the first year with them, I was out of Calgary for about 30 weeks, mostly in Houston. It got to the point where I was giving directions to the locals. But as the Canadian Federal Energy Regulator, I haven't had quite as number occasions to come out here, except maybe on vacation to meet some of my friends. Today I'll be talking to you about the major report that the NEB comes out. It's our flagship report in terms of Canada's energy future. We come out with it every few years. We look at the entire spectrum of energy, whether it's supply, demand, pricing, and have a longer-term outlook, 30 years. It's quite important for us to do this because one of the major things that we do at the National Energy Board, especially on commodity markets, is we rely on competitive markets to do the job of allocating scarce resources. And one of the vehicles that we use to tell us that yes, the markets are functioning well, and yes, we can rely on them to have that efficient allocation of resources, is by doing quite a bit of market work. And this is part of what we do at the board as part of our mandate. So today I'll be talking mostly from the results of this report, which is quite different from what I've been doing over the last year. I've been talking about the independence of energy regulatory tribunals, the laws of natural justice and all that. So it's nice to come back to my roots. Oh, also, we do have it available on our website, which is indicated here. And for those of you that, if you're like me, are data geeks, we have 260 odd pages of column after column, row after row of multiple decimal point numbers. So it's really cool stuff. You know, the staffers at the NEB say, what's the board member doing? But anyways, that's my own little personal thing. So first I'll look at the key assumptions, energy demand, oil, before focusing on natural gas, because natural gas obviously you cannot look at in the vacuum. It's a derived demand, so you have to look at the economy and what's happening there. It's in competition with other forms of energy, so you have to look at oil and other forms of energy. And then I'll talk about greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, that's the part that all our lawyers and communications people were down on me for days on end, just trying to get the nice little soundbite right, because it is probably in Canada the #1 policy issue. When you survey, and most surveys in Canada right now, what is the biggest and most important issue? It's greenhouse gases and global warming. Any party that says it doesn't exist is dead. Any party that doesn't do enough is going to be in trouble. And everybody and all the parties are basically jockeying for position. We can do it best. So I will read my script on that one. So first, the key assumptions. In this report, we include the reference case in 3 scenarios, and I really like scenarios because after being a forecaster for decades and always getting it wrong and having to smile when people remind me of scenarios give me a broad range where I can be wrong. Now, it's not really a cop-out because what it is, it provides information to decision makers and policy makers to see what are the consequences of their actions, what are the implications of their non-actions, and what kind of world we can envision in the future for making better policies and decisions today. So, anyways, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We have a reference case that covers the short and medium term, and it's based on current decisions and trends. The scenarios go up to 2030, so it's a long term, not as long as the geologists with their 100 million years horizon, but 20 years is pretty good. The continuing trends is our business as usual case. It has the highest economic and energy growth rates and middling energy prices. We have the Triple E scenario that represents a balancing of the economy, the environment, and energy objectives. There we have much more moderate growth rates in energy and economic growth, and also the lowest energy prices because it's basically an energy demand management and international cooperation heaven, if you want to call it that way. And then the fortified islands. Here it's a world where security concerns and uncertainty are paramount. It's the slowest economic and energy growth rates of all of the scenarios, and it has the highest energy prices. So let's look at prices here. First, WTI. You'll notice that really nice wide range there, going from $35 for in constant dollars per barrel in the Triple E scenario, because basically there everything is working right, everybody is cooperating, and the efficiency gains are tremendous. Then the continuing trends is a kind of a $50 constant dollars for a barrel of oil. And there you have more economic growth, and you'll see later on more greenhouse gases, but it represents our middling forecast. And then in the fortified islands scenario, we're looking at $85 oil. So right now we're beyond fortified islands, but that's I like to think of it more as kind of just a little blip on the radar screen, because I know that that's going to be reflected at the pump, and although I have a 4-cylinder, it still hurts. Natural gas prices at Henry Hub, we go from $5.50 in the low price track scenario to $7 in continuing trends, right up to $12. Now, this wide range definitely reflects the uncertainty we see out there. If you just look at the relationship between the two, in our continuing trends, we're maybe at a ratio of oil to gas prices of 7 point something to 1. But if you look at history, that relationship can swing from 18 down to 2. It's all over the map. And but fundamentally, long term, that's 7 to 1, which is a higher relationship than the energy contact between those two. It's to reflect that oil transportation costs and the utilizations mean that it has higher value than the equivalent energy in natural gas. Another important point, and this should come to no surprise to this crowd, is that it doesn't matter which scenario we looked at, energy prices are higher than we've experienced historically. So that nice little $2.20 Henry Hub price average in the 1990s, as you mentioned, that's kind of history. So now looking at energy demand. Basically, in these 3 scenarios, what you do see is growth in every single case. You do have economic growth. Economic growth, since energy is a derived demand, it would be expected to grow also if it wasn't for technological innovations. Prices have an influence also, and anyways, the end result in terms of energy demand is the range that you see here. So it grows with population. It grows with the economy. In the medium and short term, we're looking at maybe 1.8% growth rates. That's in the 10 years, which is kind of equivalent to the last 10 years that we've seen in Canada. And in the long-term growth rates, we go from 0.3% because of its much lower economic growth and much higher prices, right up to continuing trends where we see 1.4% because of its higher economic growth rate and more middling prices. Turning our attention to crude here. Total production in all scenarios is higher than existing levels. Now, the conventional oil production in Western Canada declines from the current levels in all scenarios. East Coast production first increases and then declines. Now, where is that production increase coming from? Well, oil supply is increasingly dominated from oil sands, from a low of 2.6 million barrels per day by 2030 due to lower prices and environmental measures in the EEE scenario, to a high of 4.9 million barrels per day in the fortified islands scenario due to higher prices and a preference for more secure sources of energy. Now, this tremendous growth in oil sands should not be surprising because in Canada we have this huge resource, and here the geologists, I hope, will forgive my lack of proper use of terminology, but the remaining established oil reserves in Canada are 178 billion barrels, of which 173 billion barrels are oil sands, hence the importance of oil sands to Canadian oil production and the increasing production over the future, and consequently increasing oil exports to the United States. So basically we're the second largest resource owner of oil reserves right after Saudi Arabia, and we're at your doorstep. As a result, total oil exports will increase at the current levels across all scenarios, increase or remain steady, that is. For example, total export levels reached 3.4 million barrels per day. That's a lot of barrels if that's in a year. By 2030 in the current trend scenario, and 4.4 million barrels per day in the fortified islands scenario. So basically, as I mentioned, this means that Canada is and will remain the largest exporter of oil to the United States for the foreseeable future. So now turning our attention to natural gas. Basically, Canada is blessed with a very large natural gas resource. Looking at the map, the D on the map means discovered, and the P means produced, and ultimate potential is an estimate of all resources that may become recoverable or marketable, having regard for geological prospects and anticipated technology. I hope I got that right. George? Good enough? Okay, good. He's a geologist, by the way. So this slide indicates that Canada has over 420 TCF of remaining gas resources, but you'll notice that the majority is either in frontier areas or in unconventional gas, so that means more costly to produce. For natural gas supply, with price tracks of $5.50 or $7 or $12, you do get a range in terms of supply, of course. But if drilling returns to 2005-2006 levels, that's about 18,000 gas wells drilled per year. The decline would be along the middle track, which is our EEE. Sorry, what's blue? Our continuing trend scenario. If drilling brings back to what we had experienced in the late 1990s, about 8,000 gas wells drilled per year, you get back to the low track, which is our EEE. And if you boost it up to 25,000, and right now we're experiencing a collapse in terms of drilling in Western Canada, especially on the gas side. And it's not because of the prices. The prices are looking pretty good with $7, $8 Henry Hub. It's the costs of doing business. And here's where we have to thank our Mexican friends for signing this agreement with us to basically fast-track Mexican specialized workers into the Alberta economy, because that is by far our biggest issue in terms of development, is the lack of skilled labor. So if we get those 25,000 gas wells drilled per year and aggressively develop unconventional and frontier sources, you get the high track in terms of supply, and that would be our fortified islands scenario. So let's focus now on Western Canada. Conventional gas is the largest component of supply, but as you can see from the slide, in all scenarios, it's definitely declining. But conventional gas declines are partially, at least, offset by unconventional, and that unconventional will include CBM, tight gas, and shale gas. Now, if we come to frontier northern gas compared to LNG imports, they seem to have an inversely proportional relationship in the different scenarios. For example, in the fortified island scenario, high prices and that local sourcing preference means offshore Nova Scotia, Mackenzie Delta, Beaufort Sea, offshore Newfoundland, offshore Labrador, and the Western Arctic gas are all tapped into. And then you see on the other slide where you see LNG imports, that red line, basically we're not getting much LNG coming in. But in the Triple E scenario, imports are more than double than in the continuing trends, and by 2021 we assume 7 terminals operating, and LNG imports would be almost equal to Canadian domestic gas production by 2030 in that particular world, and that would be the green line on your right hand side. Now those 7 terminals, and I think the lawyers tell me to say this, it does not presuppose any specific agreement or decision on any one of those terminals and pipelines, and that will be based on the evidence in hand. Supply-demand balance for natural gas and continuing trends. Basically, when we match up Canadian gas supply and demand, we get the potential for net gas exports. And here we have Canadian gas demand is increasing. Canadian demand increases, production decreases, so basically net exports could be negative by the end of the forecast period. Now here I have to give you a caution. This decline in exports does not mean that the export pipelines will suffer a significant supply loss. I'll give you just one example. If we bring in, well, let's call it units, 10 units of LNG in eastern Canada and re-export it into the New England states, this very same 10 units, in terms of our statistics, that's 0 net exports. But in terms of actual flows, the 10 units are being going down to the United States. Now, if you add to that, let's say Alaska gas, if it's 4 BCF or 4.5 BCF and it's coming in, and you have an equivalent amount going out, that's net exports from the Canadian perspective of 0. But in terms of flows to the United States, that would be 4 or 4.5 BCF per day. So when we say net exports are going down to 0, it doesn't mean that Canadian exports, the actual flows to the United States will be coming down like that. In the Triple E scenario, same type of story, except with the lower prices, you have a much steeper decline in production. The lower economic growth means that you'll have flattish demand, and again, you'll have net exports to the U.S. going down to and below 0 in the towards the end of the forecast period. And the fortified islands, because of the high prices and the lower economic growth, Canadian demand is fairly flat, and it's the only case in all the scenarios with $85 oil and $12 natural gas in constant dollars, where you'll see an increase in terms of the net exports to the U.S. Okay, here's the tough part. I can't believe that they were so nervous about this because it is a big political issue in Canada. I'm not the policymaker, I am the regulator, and so what you'll be getting here is independent results from an independent energy regulator. And if you look at the graph on your right, you'll see that in all cases, energy intensity is going down. So that's a good part of the story. But if you look at the graph on the left, in terms of megatons, absolute volumes of greenhouse gases being emitted, in the continuing trends, you see a substantial increase. In fortified islands, you see an increase. The only place where you see a slight decrease of 0.2% is in the Triple E scenario, and that's where everything is firing on all pistons to get it down. Now, we have a government policy of 20 by 20. That means 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2020. So this seems to be in contradiction with that, but it's not. Basically, our mandate is energy, the energy sector, which is quite important, but we don't have a mandate to look at, let's say, agricultural emission sinks, forestry emission sinks. We don't have a mandate to look how we could change our city structure to see how we can be more efficient, or we won't take into account emissions trading, for example. So the fact that we see an increase or just a leveling off does not mean that we're in conflict with the current government's policy. The results, though, are very important. It does mean that Canadians, and this is one of the reasons why we do these studies every few years, is to enable an informed debate, have very difficult choices in the upcoming years to balance their objectives in terms of economy, energy, and the environment. So a few quick overview messages here, seeing what time it is. Canadian energy markets are expected to function well, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a key finding with respect to our regulatory mandate. Energy prices are expected to remain higher than experienced in history. Energy demand is expected to increase with economic growth, and Canadians will continue to improve in terms of the efficiency with which they use that energy with. There will be ample supplies that will be available to meet Canadian needs, and this is an extremely important result that's also under our regulatory mandate because of our responsibilities with respect to international energy trade. Basically, under the NEB Act, there has to be a surplus energy to Canadian needs to be able to export. And when you look at the numbers, the surplus is so huge that at the end of the day, what you'll see is that Canada will be increasing its exports of energy, all types of energy confounded. Greenhouse gases, basically, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be tough to reach the policy, and there's some tough decisions to be made and some tough actions to be taken by all Canadians. And in terms of building blocks for successfully meeting the future challenges, well, there are many. Basically, technological innovation on the policy front, adequate investments, greater public engagement. Canadians are going to have to accept when they put into their the surveys that yes, greenhouse gases and global warming is the #1 issue with you, and then drive off in their Hummer. There's kind of a, and it's always they that should be doing something about it. Maybe every morning they should be looking at themselves and say, well, we've got a part to do in here, and that's the difficult part that I guess. The Canadian policymakers have right now is to get from what the intention is to actual actions that are acceptable by the Canadian public. I'd like to leave you with a few concluding remarks, which you have here. And first, Canada will continue to rely on market mechanisms. It's been a policy of the Canadian government since the 80s. It was reconfirmed with signing of NAFTA with Mexico and the U.S., and it's been committed to by all parties in the political Canadian political spectrum. So I think this is something that you can count on. We will continue to be part of an integrated continental energy market where the border goes both ways. Like some people ask us, well, why are we importing a lot of crude oil? And why are we exporting so much? Can't we just be self-sufficient and supply Canadian needs by Canadian oil? Well, geography and economics say differently. It's much more efficient if the eastern markets and central Canadian markets import the oil and we export the oil to the U.S. It just makes more sense for everybody. Or right now in southern Ontario, they are importing LNG from the Gulf Coast. From the Gulf Course, yeah. Yep. It hasn't quite turned to skiing yet. Gulf Coast. Now, I'm sure the molecules aren't going there themselves, but commercially that deal has been made where you are importing. So it's not just Canadian energy going south of the border. You have to remember for Calgary and Montana is south of the border. But it goes in the other direction also. And we have, thirdly, a large energy resource surpluses to our need, hence the continuing trend of energy exports towards the United States. So basically, we're the largest foreign supplier of energy to the U.S. now and in the future when you consider oil, gas, uranium, coal, electricity, and all other forms of energy. And basically, we will continue to play that very important role in the continental energy security by providing a secure source of energy to the rest of the continent that is close by, secure, and with business practices that I'm sure that you're used to. Thank you very much. If there are any questions,
Yes. As you know, the province of Alberta has changed their royalty regime. And what impact do you think that this will have on future energy production out of Alberta?
Well, first, I'm the federal energy regulator, and given the constitutional separation of powers, the provinces are the owner of the resources. As owner of the resources, they made a decision that when you get $90 or $100 oil, maybe the deal that was signed that puts a cap at $40 could be renegotiated. Now, when the price went under $20, the existing players asked on several occasions to renegotiate the contract. So basically, as the resource owner, I have no comments to make. They've decided that this is in their best interest. What the impact of that will be? Well, when you consider that of the $1.2 billion in extra royalties that will be paid by the companies each and every year, and those are tax deductible from the feds, that's us, they'll be reimbursed by about $300 million. And then when you add on to that the current government's intention to reduce business tax once more, basically in terms of actual dollars, we're talking about accountants and engineers and lawyers here in making the calculations. The impact will not be great for multiple tens of billions of dollars worth of very profitable companies. Yes?
One sleeper issue I think that's out there, which actually relates to trade with the U.S., is that the state of California has just come up with a low-carbon fuel standard, and the U.S. EPA is working on one. But in these standards, it will really penalize the import of Canadian oil sands. And if Alberta or the Canadian government does something to penalize oil sands in terms of greenhouse gas taxes or the cost of sequestration or buying carbon credits, you could potentially get into a situation of double penalty or double taxation on oil sands. So have you thought about that? Has the Canadian government thought about this issue at all yet?
Well, there are many aspects to this. First of all, the governor signed agreements with the province of British Columbia, with the province of Alberta, with the province of Ontario, basically saying, having sound policies on the environment side is a good thing to do. And also, increasing production of oil sands does not necessarily, depending on how you go about it, mean a substantial increase in terms of emissions if you take, burying of CO2 into some of the depleted reservoirs or for enhanced oil recovery. So these are challenges that the companies that are developing the oil sands will have to deal with. But they have challenges across the planet. There are different environments everywhere. We have certain rules of the game. The U.S., as a sovereign state, has decided that greenhouse gases is starting to be a deal. Governor of California has decided that this is important. Canadians are trying to basically adjust to the changes in the marketplace out there.
Mr. George, one of the messages I hear from you is Canada's been there for you, we're going to be there for you in the future. When I look at your various scenarios, the primary reason appears to be really LNG coming in. That with the exception of your fortified islands case, where you've got a high price of natural gas and virtually no LNG. Two basic questions. One is the impact of oil sands, where even looking at the NEB's high case, there's a potential by 2015 of 4 BCFD incremental demand of natural gas for oil sand production. And from a policy standpoint in North America, there is, with the exception of Massachusetts, that utilities are unable to sign long-term contracts for LNG. So North America, with the exception of Mexico, but Canada and the U.S., essentially are the last stock market for LNG. And we saw an example of that this last summer where we had 3 BCFD coming in to Cove Point and Lake Charles, and then as soon as there was a nuclear problem in Asia, started heading away from the U.S. Do you see any, first of all, any comments on that in terms of this policy issue where we can't sign long-term contracts? LNG in a short liquefaction environment must come into North America to satisfy the export supply from Canada that you laid out. And to do that, we've got to adequately compete with Europe and Asia. Is that something that the NEB is addressing from a policy standpoint? Because I know that FERC and state PUCs are trying to address that. And in your estimates, did you include some of the high cases that the NEB has for oil sands use of natural gas?
We have a range of oil sands use of natural gas, but also we're quite cognizant that there are other technologies out there. And here I'll take my hat off as the regulator, put my consultant hat on, because we did, in a previous life, we did do a lot of work on oil sands and the gasification of bitumen, the use of coke. They've got mountains of coke out there. Why not use it for energy? Did look at possibly putting a rail link for coal. That was a bit more expensive. So right now the companies themselves are looking at reducing their natural gas consumption and using the bottom of the barrel or using their mountains of coke. And we even have a proposal for a nuclear facility, although not too long ago, a energy minister in Alberta said we will never have a nuclear facility that will sterilize oil and gas production for the next million years. But he's changed his tune since then.
I was thinking more from the steam reforming, the methane steam reforming of the natural gas to strip out hydrogen to use an upgrade.
Okay, now you're going beyond my energy my knowledge base. I'm a mathematician, economist, MBA type, but in terms of hydrogen production, in terms of steam production, and in terms of electricity generation.
Converting the bitumen to synthetic oil, you're adding hydrogen to break down the double bonds where you're getting that from natural gas, which is that large increase of 4 BCFD above the baseline.
Mm-hmm. You're beyond my knowledge base on that. I'm sorry.
How about the LNG issue as far as policy, where we're essentially in competition with Europe and Asia?
Well, basically Canada and the United States, competition is a good thing. We have seen when it was very cold in Europe, LNG going to Spain. Spain was outbidding everybody at one point. And then, as you said, the nuclear facility down in Japan goes over there. And yet, we do have in North America some advantages in terms of the LNG, international LNG trade, whether it's the Atlantic Basin or the Asia-Pacific Basin, is we have huge storage facilities with which those regions don't have. So you do see when the prices go down, because the major markets are all northern climates, the load is there at the same time. In summer, where's that gas going to go? It's much more efficient keeping those liquefaction plants going. So it's going to be coming to the U.S. It's going to be coming to Canada. So if you look at it on a seasonal basis, if you look at our prices in North America, sometimes we're outbidding, if it's really cold here, Europeans and Asia, and the gas will come here. That's the beauty about competition. It'll go to the people that value it the most. So I wouldn't be afraid of world competition here. I think Canada and the U.S. has been doing a pretty good job of it over the X number of decades.
Listen, I want to thank Roland for a really interesting presentation.
Good morning. I'm Erika de la Garza, the Baker Institute Program Director of the Latin American Initiative. And before introducing our next speaker, I'd like to mention that he's here for this important conference as well as to be part of a lecture series called Mexicans Look at Mexico, which is co-sponsored by the Humanities Research Center at Rice and the Baker Institute's Latin American Initiative. In the lecture series, we've looked at education and economic development. Today we'll be looking at energy, and in the next couple of weeks we will be discussing immigration and Mexican art and culture. I'd like to thank Amy Jaffe and her staff for putting this wonderful event together, and especially Moramay Lopez Alonso from the Humanities Research Center, whose help has been invaluable in putting the lecture series together. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce Francisco Salazar, who is the president of the Mexican Energy Regulatory Commission. He's been in this position since 2005. Mr. Salazar has had a distinguished career serving his country as federal deputy for his home state, San Luis Potosí, in 2 different occasions, as well as he served on several different commissions. He is a chemical engineer with a master's in public finance and global market economics from the London School of Economics, and he has been recognized as one of Mexico's most prominent young professionals. Please help me welcome Francisco Salazar.
Thank you very much, Erika. Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's nice to see you again. Thank you very much to the Baker Institute for the invitation. And since I understand that we are late and that we are supposed to finish by 9:15 or 10:15, I have a very short time. So what I'll do is I'll try to go very quickly through the presentation. You'll keep a copy here, so in case you need to go into the details of some of the slides that I will be talking about, of course you can do it, and if you want to make further questions to the ones that we will be able to answer during or after my presentation, of course I will be here the rest of the day. Okay, let me start by describing what is the legal framework for policy making in the energy sector in Mexico. First, we have the Constitution. There are 3 articles in the Constitution that talk about the energy sector. Those are the 25th, the 27th, and the 28th. From the Constitution, you have in a second level 3 main acts that are the basic legal framework. We have the Hydrocarbons Act, or Ley Reglamentaria Artículo 27. We have the CRE Act, or it's the act of the Regulatory Energy Commission, and we have the Pemex Act. And after that, we also have a general regulation framework, which is issued by the ministry, and then we have the directives, the orders, and the resolution that are issued by the CRE. Of course, what this means is that any major policy change has to be done by the Congress, because they are the ones that issue the changes or can amend the Constitution or issue new laws. So any change has to go through the Congress. And within the executive branch, we have three kinds of agency or three kinds of actors. We have, of course, the ministry or CENER. They are in charge of policy making within the legal framework. They also do some planning, and they also establish some standards, some technical regulation. We have the operators. Mexico has three large state-owned companies in the energy sector. We have Pemex, which is in the hydrocarbons business, and we have CFE and Luz y Fuerza del Centro, which are the electricity utilities. And of course, there's the regulator, which is the CRE, and we are responsible for mostly economic regulation, also, although we also do some technical regulation. In 1995, the Congress passed the last major reform that was done to the energy sector. And that reform basically consisted in opening the downstream activities within the natural gas market. They didn't open the exploration, the production, the processing, and the sales of the natural gas, of locally produced natural gas. But what was opened was the transport, the distribution, the storage, and all the sales of natural gas. Of course, imports were allowed in the country. So this was the last major reform that was done in the sector. I think, and I believe this reform was successful. If you look at, for instance, the number of users in the distribution of natural gas, the amount has more than tripled. If you look, for instance, in terms of investment accumulated in the sector, we're talking about $1.5 billion in distribution. In terms of private open access pipelines built in natural gas sector, we're talking about almost 3,000 kilometers since 1997. The investment there, it's also around $1.5 billion. And I think that the reform was pretty good. Some of the things that were done were pretty successful. But unfortunately, not all the things were done well, or there are some pending issues after this reform. Of course, I believe that the upstream has to be open, that we have to have new incentives to promote more investment and competition, because one of the goals of or the objectives of the reform in 1995 was to have Pemex focusing their the resources into exploration. But of course, gas is not as profitable as oil, and so Pemex has devoted most of its resources to oil. It hasn't responded to the high prices in natural gas, so it hasn't been able to respond to the demand growth. And so this is, I believe, the major reform that has to be done, or the next step, if we want to have a more efficient sector. In terms of transport, although we have a model that was able to attract investment, we still need to make some changes to it in order to expand the system and to give redundancy to the system. After the explosions we have several months ago, it's clear that we have to have a different model that promotes investment in a more more investment there. And some other changes that we have to do are institutional changes that have to do with a coherent price framework in the sector, because although the price framework for natural gas has been working very well, and I have to say that in designing the price framework, we have been working with people related with the Rice University. We have Bob Brito here, who has helped us with this. Juan Rosellón also, that will be speaking later. We have a very good model that describes how the price has to be set for natural gas in Mexico. But the problem is that in some other related sectors, we have price controls. Like, for instance, in the LPG sector, the government has set some price controls, also in the fuel oil sector. So we have to have a coherent price framework. This is something that has to be done. has to be done. And of course, that is also related with strengthening the regulator, because sometimes all the regulation that we issue is of no use because of this price control. So these are some things that have to be done. But as I was mentioning, I believe that the reform worked well, and we can see it in this graph. What we have here is what was the behavior of natural gas demand after 1995 when the reform was done. And as you can see, the demand grew very rapidly, but unfortunately the production was not able to keep the pace. And that's because Pemex was not able to have enough resources invested in upstream. And of course, as you can see, the trade balance changed a lot from that because of that. And the main driver in natural gas consumption was electricity, the power sector. Of course, same as the U.S. and same as most countries, Mexico looked into natural gas to produce more electricity. So the consumption of natural gas in the power sector grew considerable well during these 10 years. During last year, the demand was almost or was more than 6.5 BCFs a day. Of that, 48% corresponded to the oil sector. Of course, that includes reflows within the oil sector to produce oil. 35% of that was related to the power sector, almost 15% to the industry, and 1.6% to the residential sector. And we expect the demand to grow at an annual rate of 3.9 over the next 10 years. So how to face this increase in demand? Of course, we have some integration with the United States, same as the United States has integration with Canada. But the problem is that if we take a look at the North America's gas picture, what we can see is that the United States, as Ambassador was saying, is not anymore self-sufficient. It's importing natural gas from Canada. So Mexico has to do something about it, because we cannot rely always on U.S. gas. So especially if we are going to keep on growing the consumption of natural gas in the power sector, as it is the case, as you can see it here. The problem with consumption of natural gas in the power sector is that it will grow at a faster pace than the growth of natural gas consumption. We'll have to add 24 gigawatts of new capacity, and most of it will be relying on natural gas. So all of this, what implies is a 7.3 average annual growth rate of natural gas. So we have to do something about it. So what can we do to face this increasing demand? First of all, we have to continue promoting private investment in LNG. We have been able to promote investment there. We have to keep on working on this, and we have to strengthen the pipeline infrastructure we have. Mexico will start exploring its coal bed methane reserves. Fortunately, they are not very large. As a matter of fact, there are not accurate numbers on the amounts of these reserves, but this is something that can be done right now. And we have to continue insisting in having Pemex focusing their resources in investments of more production. So this is what the natural gas balance looks in the next years. As you can see, most of the gap will be filled with LNG. And this is because, fortunately, we have been able to issue some good LNG regulation. In year 2002, when it was already clear that Mexico had to rely on some other sources, CRE published the first standard for LNG plants, and we received 5 permits applications for 5 different LNG facilities. In 2003, we granted the first LNG permit, and then 2 more permits were issued that year. And then on year 2004, we issued or we published the final standard for LNG facilities. And so far we have issued or we have granted 5 LNG permits. Of these 5 permits, there are 2 which are already working. Well, 3, let's say 3, because 2 of the projects, the project, the Shell project in Baja, as well as the Sempra project in Baja, were joined. So those 2 permits got into a single project. And this project, as I will show you in a few slides, will start operation early next year. And we also have the Shell project in Altamira that is already working. It started receiving LNG shipments in year 2005. 2 other projects, although they received our permit, those projects were canceled. The first one was a Marathon project in Tijuana, and they were not able to obtain a construction permit from the local authorities, so they decided they didn't want to do it. And after that, the Chevron Texaco, they had an offshore project, but because the cost of steel went up and because the Sempra and Shell project was already being constructed, they decided to cancel that project. So basically, with the regulation we have, it is possible to attract investment, and there are several ways in which the terminal developers can participate in the acquisition of LNG. They can either sign long-term contracts, which has been the case of Altamira and which will be the case of Manzanillo, or they can probably have a terminal that will receive spot cargoes, and this is something that is being considered by some developers. This is the Mexico LNG map. As you can see, we have 3 terminals that are already installed. Well, the Altamira facility and the Ensenada, the Sempra Shell facility. And after that, the other project that will be constructed will be Manzanillo. That project has to be ready by year 2011. And 2 other projects that will compete probably between themselves are Puerto Libertad and Topolobampo. And 2 more projects in the coast of Gulf of Mexico, the Matamoros and the Coatzacoalcos. They are offshore projects, and another project is being considered in Yucatan. Quickly, the terminal at Altamira has a capacity to gasify 0.5 to 0.7 BCFs a day. This started operations in year 2006. Then also we have Energía Costa Azul, the project by Sempra. Currently, it will have a capacity to regasify 1 BCF a day. It will start operations in the first quarter of next year, but it will be expanded. We have just approved the expansion of the terminal, so it will be able to gasify 2.6 BCFs a day in the next future. It will be connected through a pipeline to the United States, so although it will be consuming it will be serving the Baja market, it will also be exporting a lot of gas to the California market. And then we have a Manzanillo project. This is a project that is being pushed by CFE. CFE has to secure supplies to convert some of their plants and to do some other new plants in the center of Mexico. So they need natural gas. So what they have done is they have they went into a bid, and that bid was awarded to Repsol last September, and the gas will come from Peru. Basically, they have signed a long-term contract. The long-term contract states that the price will be 0.91 of the price at Henry Hub minus 3 cents per million BTU, and the duration of the contract will be 15 years. This is the supply schedule. As you can see, the plant will be receiving 0.4 BCFs and during the first stage of the project, and then after year 2015, it will have to have around 0.5 BCFs. This is where the terminal will be. And then we have the Puerto Libertad project. This is a project by El Paso. They have already been granted the permits from Semarnat, the environmental authority, and they are considering to probably submit an application next year to the CRE. This project will be serving some consumption, some CFE consumption in the state of Sonora, but also it will be serving Arizona's market, especially during the summer when they have a lot of consumption of natural gas. Some other LNG projects that we have are the offshore projects. I guess they would be similar to the Energy Bridge Gulf Gateway project here in the Gulf of Mexico. Those would be linked to two underground storage projects, one in the state of Veracruz, the other one in the state of Tamaulipas, and the Topolobampo project in Sinaloa and the project in Yucatan. Of course, what we can see here is that some of these projects will require more transport or gas pipelines, and to do that, we'll have to change the framework for transport. As I was saying, we consider that the transport development in Mexico has been pretty good, has attracted good investments, has created some gas pipelines, but we need to change the framework if we want to have a system that gives redundancy or that attracts more investment. What is the problem, or what are the problems of the current model that we have? Well, first, of course, sometimes the users have forced the government to intervene in the market, and it has override the regulation, and of course that means some risks for new investment. Fortunately, we're getting away from that. And the other thing is that the current transport model is not the best option, because every new investment will have to be paid entirely by the new users, and it doesn't recognize any externalities that it brings to the current users of the system. So it's very expensive, and it of course reduces the amount of new users that it can have. So we're looking at something like a rolling model that would recognize the positive externalities of new investment. And besides that, we're working with the current Pemex tariff model to solve some problems, because it leads to some transport arbitrage, and it is very complicated to implement because it has a very large number of zones. So what we are doing is we're working with the ministry. We will have a new national integrated gas line or gas pipeline system. And this system will comprehend both the existing national pipeline system owned by Pemex and other interconnected private systems. And rolling will be used to facilitate expansions and redundancy. Of course, it has to be, or any new investments that are to be included in this national integrated system will have to be efficient, and will have to show that they bring positive externalities to the current users. This is the general description of the model we'll have. Currently, if you want to have a new pipeline, you have to pay the tariff at the national pipeline system, and plus that you have to pay, if you're a user located in an area, the entire tariff of the new private system. With this new model, what we would have is two new charges: a national injection charge that would probably recognize the benefits that the new project gives to the existing users, and then we would have also a zone or extraction or transit charge that will be charged to the users on the zone that will be mostly benefit by this new investment. And as I was saying, we will be reducing the number of zones. This will help to make a more transparent system, less complicated. It has price consistency. I won't get into these details. They just show that it is price consistent. And this is an example of how the system works currently and how it will work. Currently, for instance, if you're a user that want to have gas, for instance, in El Bajío, which is a zone in the center of Mexico, you pay the the tariff of using the national pipeline system, and then you have the private tariff. But instead of that, what we will have is different charges that will be charged to all the users and to the local users. And as you can see, instead of if you're a user in this zone, instead of paying 13.14 pesos per gigajoule with the current system, you will be paying 8.84 pesos. And if you're a user that are not located in that area, the only increase you will be facing is going up from 8.53 to 8.84. And so this makes a huge difference, and and it recognizes the benefits that the new system will be bringing to the existing users. The other thing that we are pushing is real open access to the transfer system. Unfortunately, the industrial sector has opposed to open access because they have a very cheap tariff coming from Pemex. So we are convinced that we need this in order to promote and foster competition, in order to make the system work more efficiently. Okay, let me finish with the conclusions. I've tried to do it fast, but it's crazy. Okay, the demand for natural gas in Mexico has been growing, and it will continue growing because there's faster growth in the demand than in the production. So we have to rely on LNG. The existing and proposed LNG projects will help to satisfy the existing demand in the demand growth both in the U.S. and in Mexico. It will bring natural gas to zones in Mexico where there is no supply currently. It will also help to avoid large fluctuations in price. And of course, it will require LNG projects. These LNG projects will require new pipelines in the zone, and some other measures could also help, like, for instance, exploiting the coal bed methane reserves. Of course, there are some other challenges, and I believe that the most important challenge is to openly discuss a legislative bill that would allow for more investment and competition in the upstream sector. Second, we have to stick to policies that allow prices to reflect market conditions and avoid price controls. We have to strengthen the regulator because sometimes the regulation is override. And this implies that in the absence of constitutional autonomy to the regulators, something similar to the Bank of Mexico, the government should support regulatory measures that are aimed to promote an efficient use of infrastructure and secure new investments. And finally, we have to implement administrative measures adverse to unbundling of monopolistic activities and competition within the state-owned companies. So with this, I finish, and if there are some questions, please go ahead. Yes.
With your new approach, you had laid out a number of new pipelines, Naco to Hermosillo down to Guadalajara. Current bottleneck between Juarez and Chihuahua. Will this help alleviate that bottleneck?
Yes, that's another project that is considered under this model.
Francisco, can you go back to your map of your proposed pipeline zones?
Pipeline zones.
Yes, right there.
Okay.
I've been puzzling on the Manzanillo pricing ever since it was announced. Well, I don't think I'm the only one. One of the things that I'm wondering about is whether the pricing formula might be intended in part to discourage movements of natural gas west via pipeline on a Henry Hub formula that we would equate with that, Henry Hub plus transportation, which would actually price the gas considerably higher than what the Manzanillo formula yields. So was that a factor in the thinking on that contract?
No, but let me tell you what, we were not involved in the Manzanillo contract. Of course, that was a contract that was signed between CFE and Repsol. And that's the price for CFE. But according to our numbers, with the current with the new tariffs for the transport system, that gas will be able to compete with gas coming from the south and gas coming from the north, and it will be able to compete even at the center of the country. I don't know if, but it wasn't intended to do.
Achieve the corollary, which is to get gas in cheap enough to actually set up the competitive pricing scheme that you all have been striving for all of these years.
Yes. But
and the Peruvians are willing to go along with that.
Yes. Yes. Well, they didn't have too many choices if they wanted to deliver the gas. Yes. But I don't know if, of course, that was not the intention, but it results that way.
Okay, I think we're ready for a coffee break.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Yeah.